So what we're going to attempt to do now is publish our application to a new Linux server. And I've come onto the DigitalOcean platform, and this is the cloud platform I use when I just want to spin up a new Linux server or use it for my normal hosting as well, because they're pretty good, they're pretty cheap, and it costs it costs hardly anything to run a Linux server using DigitalOcean. So this is the one I'm using, and it's really just to create a Linux server. So if you already have a Linux server elsewhere, then feel free to go ahead and use that one to publish your particular application. But if you don't have one and you want a Linux server for testing, then this is a good place to come and go and do so. There is a referral link that I have that you can use if you want to, that will give you $50 worth of credit for the first month. Or if you've already got an account, please feel free to use that, or just create a new account regardless. And what we'll do is we'll create a new Linux server and we'll publish our application to this. So DigitalOcean uses the concept of Droplets, which is basically a virtual server. So what I'm going to do is just going to go and create a new Droplets, which is, like I say, a Linux server. And what we want to do is get a Linux server that already comes installed with MySQL and Apache as well. And it's often referred to as a LAMP server because it also comes with PHP. And I'm just going to go to the marketplace here, and what we want to find is the LAMP on 18.04. Now this is going to be an Ubuntu server, version 18.04, so I'm just going to click on this one. And this tells us what it's going to come with, and what we're concerned about is Apache and MySQL server. So we'll make use of this, and I'm going to configure the LAMP droplet first of all. And what we can do is we can choose the cheapest possible option, and the cheapest one they offer is $5 a month, which is 0.007 cents an hour. So if you create this just for testing purposes, then it's going to cost next to nothing to demonstrate this. So what we'll do is just choose a data center region. I'll just stick with the default. And then we can choose the authentication options, and just for simplicity, I'm just going to choose a one-time password, which is going to be emailed to me, and I'll be able to use that to log into my Linux server, and then it will give us an option to change the password once we get into it. So I'm just going to use that, and I just want a single droplet, and I'm just going to give it a name of reactivities-demo in this case. And the project I've created for this is called Reactivities, so I'll just stick with this one, and then I'll just go ahead and create the new droplets. And this will take a minute or so to create. So once this is created, we then need to go and log into our Linux server. So it's given us the IP address, so I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard. And what we could do then is we can open a terminal window to SSH into this particular server. Now, in later versions of PowerShell, if you're using Windows, you can use PowerShell to do this as well. If you're on an older version of Windows, then you will need to download and install a tool called PuTTY, which will allow you to make an SSH connection to the server. But if you're on a modern version of Windows and you've got an up-to-date version of PowerShell, then you'll be able to follow along exactly as I'm doing here to make a connection to our Linux server. So what we want to do is SSH, and we want to say root, which is the name of the admin user, and we want to paste in the IP address of our server and press return. And it will give us a warning about the fingerprint, and I just want to say yes to continue. And what we need to do then is paste in the password that we got emailed to us from DigitalOcean. So I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard and paste it in and press return. And we're required to change our password when we first log into this server, so I'm just going to paste in my password again, press return, and then just create a new password so I can access this. And now I'm inside the newly created Linux server. Now, also attached to this lesson is a list of steps that we need to go through to configure our Linux server. And I've got these written as a list of steps because I am not a Linux admin. So this is really for me as well as you, so that we can install and configure our Linux server. And what we want to do first of all is, now we've logged into our Linux server, we want to set up MySQL with the app user that we've defined in our connection string in our application. So we need to get into MySQL first of all. And the password to get into MySQL is available inside the root folder and the DigitalOcean password. So we want to get our password for MySQL from inside here. And what we can do is we can use cat, which is just a utility to display the text of a text file. And we'll say cat and root /DigitalOcean password and press return. And this gives us our MySQL password. So I'm just going to copy this into my clipboard. And then what we want to do is log into MySQL. So we can do that by using MySQL-u and then root-p. So MySQL-u and root-p. And we can paste in the password from our clipboard, and this gets us into MySQL. And then what we want to do is just create our app user as we did on our development machine. So I'm just going to copy the create user command into my clipboard and just paste it in here and press return, and that's okay. And then I'm just going to grant all privileges on this user and paste this in and press return, and that's okay as well. And then just flush the privileges and paste this in and press return, and that's all good as well. And then we can quit out of MySQL Server. And what we need to do next is we need to install the .NET Runtime onto our new Linux machine, and there's a bunch of instructions that Microsoft have provided, and I'm just going to copy this link into my clipboard, head over to my browser and just go to this location, because there's a bunch of commands that we need to run on this particular server to get this installed and running. And let's just go through and literally copy and paste what we need to into our Linux server. And what we need to do first of all is register the Microsoft key and feed. So I'm just going to copy this line, this wget line, and paste this in and press return, and copy the next line. And once again, just paste this in and press return. And then we need to install the .NET Runtime, and we'll just run these 4 commands. So we'll add the repository. And once that's complete, we'll then use the next command and paste this in as well. And then we'll update apt-get, and we'll paste this in. And finally, we can actually go ahead and install a runtime. So we'll use this to actually install the ASP.NET Core runtime. And answer yes. And this will take a few minutes to go ahead and install this. Okay, once that's complete, let's just go back and take a look at the instructions. And we didn't get an error, so we don't need to do any of this. And that's all we need to do. So let's head back to our list of steps that we need to take here. The next thing we need to do is configure Apache, and because we proxy our requests to our Kestrel server from Apache, we need to install the proxy module and the proxy HTTP, and also the rewrites module here as well. So I'm just going to copy this line and paste this into my Linux server. And some of these were already enabled, but that's fine. Then we can just go ahead and use this line to restart Apache. And then what we need to do is configure our virtual host inside Apache. And what we want to do is add some configuration to the sites available folder inside Apache. And what we're going to do in here is basically create a virtual host. And this is going to listen on the IP address. This asterisk means any IP address that the server is listening on. Then we've got our proxy configuration, because when a request comes into our virtual host, we want to proxy this request back to our Kestrel server, which is then going to reverse proxy this request back out of Apache. We've got some logs that we're just setting up here as well, just in case we get any errors. And especially because we're using Signal R, we also need to rewrite our requests to make use of the WebSocket ports or WebSocket protocol, so that these requests also get passed to our Kestrel server. And then we can just enable the site after this. So let's do this first of all. Let's copy this command and paste this one inside so that we open up the text editor, and then let's just take our virtual host configuration and just paste this inside here. And this should be good, so we can save this. So I'm just going to Control and X to exit and say yes to save the changes and press return. And what we should be able to do then is enable our site. So what we can do is just go back and say A2N site to enable the site, and which is called Reactivities. It's based on the first part of the name here for the configuration inside our sites available folder. So let's just do this as well. And this enables the site, and we then need to just reload Apache and press return. So next on our list of things to do is go ahead and actually deploy our published application before we go any further. And we'll take a look at doing that next.